Thank you all for the opportunity to let us present on the collaboratives for the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. We're really looking forward to some great participants over the next 2 years. So I first wanted to start off with this beautiful picture taken by the director of the Finger Lakes Institute, Dr. Lisa Kleckner. This is a volunteer looking for hydrilla in Cayuga Lake, and what we're finding is Nyctalopsis obtusa, or Starry Stonewort. So in the presentation, I'll have Starry Stonewort as SSW for reference. So what is Starry Stonewort? Well, it's a macroalgae, but it's very often mistaken as a vascular plant, and it's also misidentified or mistaken for the caras, the muskgrasses. So it is very likely that this inhabits many lakes that we just don't know about. It's very typical in lakes, ponds, slow-moving water bodies. It's known to grow up to 30 meters, but it really just takes place most often in 1 to 4 meters of water. It spreads vegetatively through these stems or bulbils, and I'll show a picture of a bulbil in future slides. The real thing that we want to look at, though, is that it impedes recreation. It inhibits fish spawning. It really acts like tumbleweeds. If you think about the Old West and these tumbleweeds, it stacks within the water column and actually can grow outside of the water column. So that's a real issue in the Finger Lakes here. Recent work has confirmed statistically the influence of dock density and marina proximity to the Starry Stonewort's presence. So this really provides a strong link to the role that watercraft and recreationists likely play for its introduction and spread. There's been plenty of work by Pullman and Crawford, Fleece, Midwood, etc. Here are, some observations through IMAP. I didn't include the whole Great Lakes Basin, but the USGS has a great animated map that shows the spread and impact from when it was first observed in 1978 in the St. Lawrence area, all throughout the Great Lakes Basin. So why are we concerned about it now? It's been here since the 1970s. Is it really that big of an issue? Well, of course, we're going to make the case that yes, it is. So while we've seen some significant population in Tully Lake, Lake Moraine, Canandaigua Lake, it's growing out of the water column. But there's such a gap analysis here for information on control. So we're looking at increasing our preventative strategies, but how do we control what we have as infestations currently? And speaking with NYISRI, Nancy Mueller has indicated that there's no known successful chemical use in New York State. So where we're doing prevention, we obviously know we take real strides to prevent the spread and impact of invasive species. We support these preventative measures in the Finger Lakes, within New York State, within the Great Lakes Basin. There's a strong emphasis there, but strong prevention programs, such as the ones listed on the screen here. We also look at early detection followed by a rapid response. So while these programs provide early detection, what is the effective response plan that we have? And we're making the case that we don't have a good response plan for Starry Stonewort because there is this gap of knowledge for effective response that's actually going to control populations. And that's where we need to put our effort. In terms of control, mechanical harvesting has been likened to mowing your lawn. It really just takes off the top layer and it grows back in full force. So this is occurring in the Keuka outlet. The Keuka Lake Association has received a New York State DEC grant to provide this harvesting. It's also occurring in Sodus Bay, some of the Kettle Lakes. Chemical control, I can link you to information online about the application of copper-based algicides, such as copper sulfate, chelated copper. It's used in the Starry Stonewort control, but it really hasn't had conclusive outcomes that show a long-term control method in New York State. And then there's other options for other lakes, looking at just a watch and wait approach. So we're just going to watch the population increase to the water column because we don't know an effective control method. So Canandaigua Lake down near Woodville on the south end has had really strong populations. Dr. Bruce Gilman and Kim McGeary have been doing studies and rake tosses over the past 2 years. They gave me their data. I did not include it here, just given the time constraints of this presentation, but there are lakes who are doing a lot of research on Starry Stonewort with limited conclusion for control. So that really provides the foundation for why we wanted to move forward with the Starry Stonewort Collaborative. We knew that there was a gap analysis here. We knew that we needed to find controls, methods that work. We needed to find ways to network with other people across the basin because, you know, the big guns in Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, they're dealing with this. They have far more marketing capacity, natural resource capacity, and yet when I reached out to partners from those states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Indiana, I wanted to gain a sense of how important Starry Stonewort was to their programs, and most of the partners that I reached out to indicated strong support for collaboratives, but that they lacked the time to facilitate the program. And so therefore, we knew that there was a high need for this work. And so that's why we took steps to put in for this application. So what are our goals? You know, obviously we want to collate existing information. There is a lot of information out there. There's a lot of research papers or white papers in press, but we want to create this one focal point, one area where people can get their information. But we also want to increase collaboration among experts and professionals, community at large, and thereby increase the capacity of people on the ground for outreach. So, you know, what are the user groups that are at risk for spreading this invasive species? So having this information available will make it far more valuable for Starry Stonewort control and preventative measures. The game plan for our project, we put in our grant to hire a 3/4 time project coordinator, but in addition to that, we'll have administrative support as well as 2 student interns. We'll be convening an expert panel to help provide information, create that SWOT analysis of the information that's available. We'll be hosting webinars, and then we'll engage in outreach events across the basin. So Michigan and Wisconsin this year had, on August 5th, Starry Trek, where they, you know, encouraged their partners and volunteers to go out and survey for Starry Stonewort. And so if we can contribute and participate and facilitate more of those activities, we'll get a better sense of across state ability to look for Starry Stonewort and then potentially create these strategies to control. So who are the players? This expert consultant group will be meeting, we'll be trying to develop or refine BMPs and fact sheets. This expert consultant group will be compensated as an honorarium so that it won't be terribly onerous for them to participate. But then we're also going to reach out to lake associations and community members to really engage and increase survey. We know in the Finger Lakes region, it's woefully under surveyed. We know a lot of people recreate, but we don't really know what's underneath the water in some locations. So we will increase the capacity to do these surveys. We also want to engage in students and teachers with the spread prevention method, high-risk AIS, why it's important to prevent the spread and impact of invasive species. So all of these are, you know, going to be our stakeholders in this project. And, you know, what are our outcomes? You see in the bottom right, that's a picture at the Keuka outlet. It's an underwater picture. It's just pillowing in that location. So, you know, developing and refining useful tools. You know, obviously the benefit here is to create a useful output. We're going to support on-the-ground surveys and reportings, provide tools to prevent further spread and impact, because that's really the overall goal, is to reduce the further spread of Starry Stonewort while also looking at effective control methodologies. And then next steps, we're going to re-engage with the experts that we've already communicated with. We participated in a U.S. Army Corps of Engineers-led Starry Stonewort research meeting that happened in early September. The outputs for there will look at what are the gaps in information, what are the research needs. No one has been able to culture Starry Stonewort. They're able to grow it in a lab and have bulbils produced, but the legs of Starry Stonewort are really stringy, so it doesn't act in a control setting the way that it does in a natural lake environment. So that makes these studies really difficult. So how can we support some of those culture studies? We're going to set schedules of webinars, meetings. For the Finger Lakes Research Conference, we are having Robin Sleeth from the New York Botanical Garden come and speak about Starry Stonewort. We're having CPRO come with a poster talking about control for Starry Stonewort. So we'll have multiple areas where Starry Stonewort will be present. We're also presenting at the Binational Great Lakes AIS Forum in Ann Arbor next month. So we're starting to ramp up our presence and our networking capacity for Starry Stonewort, even while we're trying to finish up the paperwork that goes along with having this grant. Another outcome will be an outreach plan to increase the interaction of public-private. So people on the line here, New York Invasive Species Research Institute, the New York State Federation of Lake Association members. So all of these stakeholders and partners will be encouraged to participate in either surveys or webinars or other aspects of this program. So I just want to conclude with, if this is something of interest for you, please reach out to me. My contact information is on the first slide, and we can move forward from there, and I can put you on an email distribution list. And I will conclude with there, Linda, and give it to Andrea for the next collaborative.
Thank you very much, Hilary. This presentation will be recorded and will be available later, so if you do need to refer back to Hilary's contact information, that will be available.
Okay.
Andrea, are you ready?
Yes, great. Is this showing up?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, I'm going to be talking about slender false brome, Brachypodium sylvaticum. Actually, I can't get my slide to advance. Hold on a second. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. The controls get hidden. So, again, I'm here talking about slender falciform, Brachypodium sylvaticum, a little bit different from Starry Stonewort, and I think that although we've talked about it quite a bit here in New York, there's probably still a lot of people who have never even heard of this species. And so slender falciform, it is an invasive grass. What we have found here in New York is that it has the ability to invade not only a wide range of habitats, but also really dominate these areas to the almost complete exclusion of all other species. And it is also visibly moving, and so we're able to go from one year to the next and see the species expand. Because the species isn't very well known in this area in the eastern United States, it took a number of years to really bring together the information that we needed to identify the species and to really get started with addressing the species. And so just to give a little bit of history about it, prior to the discovery of Brachypodium here in the eastern United States, this species was only known from the Pacific Northwest, where it was discovered outside of Eugene, Oregon in 1939. And so from there, Brachypodium had spread throughout the Pacific Northwest, invading the rest of Oregon, Washington, Northern California, British Columbia as well. So it's up in Canada too. And even Oregon, Washington, and California have all classified Brachypodium as a noxious weed. And so the infestations here in New York, they were first positively identified in 2009. We don't know exactly when the initial invasion occurred. We estimate that it was probably in the early 1990s. But it's also unclear as to how the species arrived here. All the usual suspects have been raised as possibilities, from simply the species being far more widespread than we realize, because it isn't one that is easily identifiable to kind of the everyday folks out there. But also we've looked at possibly movement along rail lines, also separate introductions. The species is known to have been used in botanical gardens, so it is possible that the species did not actually make the jump from directly the Pacific Northwest to the eastern United States. And also, some people have brought up botanists. It's notable that the species has shown up in some of our highest quality natural areas in New York. And so these are areas that we don't necessarily consider to be high probability areas. It's not usually where we see new invasions start. And so the idea that perhaps it was being transported by the botanists that may have been out in different areas was something that's been brought up. But either way, understanding the current distribution of the species is essential. So whether it is still isolated or it is widespread, we really do need to know that. We do know that the species is very easily spread by seed, and so it's moved readily by mowers, deer, people, just about everything. And so in 2009, New York State had given the Brachypodium a very high invasiveness ranking, and so that allowed it to be added to the Part 575 prohibited and regulated species list, which was really important for us also for raising awareness. This is a distribution map from 2016, and so this was initially what we were looking at. And so there were about so I guess in addition to the populations at Virgin Swamp and Taconic Falls, there were about 7 other sites in the Great Lakes Basin. Here you just see New York State. There was an additional site in Genesee County near Bergen, one in Syracuse, one in Dutchess County in the Lower Hudson Prism, and 2 additional locations in Tompkins County near Taconic Falls. In addition to this, there was a site. There is a site in Michigan as well as one in Canada, and so it is within the Great Lakes Basin. And again, it's just that we have the need to identify the true presence and distribution of the species. And so based on this, this initial need, Western York PRISM actually held our first working group meeting last year in December. And we had 12 people from across the state, so from 12 different, or 17 people from 12 different organizations across the state who participated in this initial working group meeting. And with this first meeting, we really did identify our priorities and what it was that we really needed, what information and resources were needed to effectively manage Brachypodium, to understand the species, identify the pathways, and kind of identify, again, why it's here. And so you can see here, these are the priorities or the themes that came from that first meeting. And something that isn't explicitly identified here is certainly the need to identify funding in order to increase our capacity to actually address these needs. And so it was about this time when the GLRI RFP had come out, and so we had decided to move forward with identifying and applying for those funds. But in the meantime, we got to work. So what's really great with having this working group and people who are very interested in everything that was going on, we were able to get started with raising that awareness about the species, getting word out. And so if any of you have heard about this species in the last year, it's really due to the work of those of us in the working group. First flyers were developed by both New York State DEC and Finger Lakes PRISM. We developed display posters. We put boot brush stations out that highlighted Brachypodium, and a lot of other outreach went into this. Research continued to go on at Virgin Swamp. Andy Graham with SUNY Brockport had been doing quite a bit of research on not only just the kind of microhabitats that Brachypodium and those niches that it was filling within Virgin Swamp, but also looking at where and how it was spreading. And this is all very important information for us. And the Virgin Swamp Preservation Society was also doing some research looking at comparing different management methods in areas within the preserve that had near 100% cover of Brachypodium. Western York PRISM was able to bring on an intern who did a GIS-based habitat suitability mapping project for us. And the work that he had done really helped us guide surveys that were planned for 2017. As I mentioned, most of our information comes from the Pacific Northwest. And the Pacific Northwest is quite different from the Great Lakes Basin, most notably in kind of this habitat suitability, because most of the work that has been done in the Pacific Northwest focused on aspect and elevation as kind of the habitat breakdown, and we don't have a lot of that. So we really needed to look at very different habitat indicators to see where Brachypodium may be able to survive and thrive in the Great Lakes Basin. I'd also like to point out and thank DEC, the Invasive Species Coordination Section, who helped out tremendously by securing interns through their program partnership with ESF. So we were able to have 2 dedicated survey interns. One was based out of Western York PRISM. They were hosted by SUNY Brockport. And then the other was hosted by State Parks and was out of Taconic Falls State Park. And so there's actually also an additional intern that was based out of the Lower Hudson PRISM who worked on a number of things, including Brachypodium surveys. So you can just see by the people that I've mentioned already, there's a lot of efforts going on. There are a lot of different organizations involved in Brachypodium work at this time. And so to give you a brief look at what our surveys did for us this summer, and this is just kind of, this map is a little bit estimated just based on some of the information I've been able to get. I haven't been able to really look through all of the data that was collected just yet. But this shows kind of good news, bad news, I guess. The good news is in Western New York, what we found, and by Western New York, I'm just referring to Western New York PRISM, is that while we did find it at a number of sites, we also found a lot of sites where it wasn't present. And so that was encouraging for us. Some of the surveys in Taconic Falls area, there was certainly quite a bit more of it down in that area, in the Tompkins County area. And so just with the time restrictions today, I don't have time to really go into our protocols and what all of this means, but hopefully this gives you a little bit of an idea where the majority of the plants and infestations that we found were still fairly scattered. And so that does allow us the ability to possibly go in and do management, whereas there aren't a lot of sites that were really dense throughout, so those kind of larger infestations. So this brings us now to the funding that we were able to get through GLRI to really get started on a lot of our priorities identified by the working group. And so we did receive the award just about a month ago, and the identified tasks and outputs for this working group really do mimic and fall in line with the ones that were identified last year. And so we were able to now put a lot more focus on those. And in some ways, it's very similar to what Hilary was talking about with Starry Stonewort. There's definitely the need to bring more information on this species to the region. We will be developing a website that will be that hub of information. We need to look more into that habitat suitability. The project itself will allow for the funding of a dedicated project manager, a working group coordinator, and we actually have that position open now. We're reviewing applications, and so there's still time to apply if you know of anyone who is interested in that. It's a full-time 2-year position. And some of the other things that we're going to be looking at is developing a rapid response plan and strategic management plan for, primarily focusing on New York, because that's where we know the species to be here, but also taking into account and making sure that it can be used on a broader Great Lakes Basin scale. And so just kind of finishing up, I'd like you to know what we're doing right now. We did just have a working group meeting just about a month ago, right after the award was presented, in which we went over some of the survey data that was collected and again identified some of the upcoming things that need to be done in order to get this off the ground. Again, we are hiring the project manager. We're going to be developing a work plan as soon as that project manager comes on board. Looking to have another working group meeting, hopefully one that's in person in December. And we're going to be taking a look at that survey data. We'd like to update the habitat suitability maps. Some of the information that we were collecting along with the survey information was really about the types of habitats that it was found in. And so I think we have a whole new set of data that we can use to improve the habitat suitability maps. We're also going to be identifying survey needs for 2018. And we're going to be reaching out to partners about maybe implementing some management so that we can start taking a look at identifying what those best management practices would be as far as removal, but also really important is identifying those pathways of invasion and spread prevention mechanisms that would be effective. And so that's my presentation. And so you can see here my contact information as well as Hilary's. If you'd like to ask either one of us questions, I don't know how much time we have